Thank you, Mr. President. Before I address the efforts that we've been engaged in to push back against the Chinese virus, I want to assure the American people that, as President Trump just said, your State Department, your entire national security team is staying focused on the other.
Oh, my gosh. Good Lord. What will I ever do? I declare I have the vapors. I'm so upset. The Secretary of State he just called it the Chinese virus. Oh, no. Why is the media so invested in not referring to it as a Chinese virus? Fascinating question in and of itself. Because, for one, you know that they're trying to make sure as much as possible that they leave open. This is the only way that Joe Biden becomes president, is if this is viewed by the public as a disaster for the Trump administration in terms of the Trump administration's handling of this. That's the only way they kind of recognize this, that Joe Biden is likely to become president. That's what the expectation really is. So now as we look at this, we can always remember that they're leaving those narrative pieces there to not just hammer day to day in some ways, but also for later on, they can return to it and say, Trump did a terrible job. When in reality, we don't know how good of a job Trump has done because it's not over. But so far, the president can only be called guilty of trying to be calming and optimistic in the early phases of this when he called for a ban on flights from China. That I have a whole thread on this, or maybe I could even pull this up for you as we go through this. I mean, this was completely remarkable. People pulling together all of the different ways in which the media was initially covering Trump's 131. So January 31st announcement of barring entry into the U.S. from China. Many in the scientific community, and I've been saying this to you on the show for a while, many people who are supposed to be our expert class, they were jumping on the president on this one. They hate Trump so much because scientists also have, a culture of Trump hatred that is mostly from the climate change issue, but there are others as well. Not all scientists, obviously. Dr. Anthony Fauci doesn't hate the president, but he also is a public servant. He just wants people to not get and die from terrible diseases. So thankfully, there are still some of those people left out there. Dr. Fauci went to my high school, by the way, Regis High School. I don't know if I mentioned that on the show yesterday or not. I meant to. Go Regis. That's right. Turning out some good people from Regis High School here in New York City. Here's some of the way that the media covered this. Trump administration restricts entry into the U.S. from China. The travel disruption sent shocks through the stock market and rattled industries that depend on the flow of goods and people between the world's two largest economies. Seems like a very negative take on it, doesn't it? Sent shockwaves to the stock market, rattled industries. Okay. Some public health and policy experts said the restrictions announced Friday, weeks after the virus was discovered in China, might not do as much officials hoped in containing the contagion. At this point, sharply curtailing air travel to and from China is more of an emotional or political reaction, said Dr. Michael Osterholm, an epidemiologist and director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota. I don't know, Dr. Osterholm. Maybe when the New York Times comes for an anti-Trump quote, think twice about just playing into their game, because now all the big experts, Dr. Fauci and others, are going around saying that the reason we're not Italy right now, if you have to point to one reason why we are not in the situation of Italy, where you have people that are being denied care and dying, that's where we are now. Rationing. Oh, you mean that the government doesn't just get to determine how much health care everybody gets? That there's a finite number of providers and a finite number of systems and healthcare equipment, and it doesn't matter what, the Bernie Sanders of the world, everybody gets everything for free. That's not how it works. The reason that we aren't in the terrible circumstance that Italy finds itself in right now, is because, in part, and if you're pointing to one factor, this more than anything else, Donald Trump stopped the flow of people from China into the United States. And yet you look at this, you look at the way this was reported on at the time. Here you go. Here's another example of this is the Washington Post, right when Trump announced limiting people for the travel ban from China. Here's what the Washington Post wrote, right when it happened, right when it was announced. Even before U.S. officials announced such a drastic escalation in travel restrictions on Friday, China's foreign ministry criticized the United States for making unfriendly comments during the coronavirus outbreak and set a U.S. warning against travel to China went against recommendations made by the World Health Organization to not restrict travel or trade. Quote, in disregard of World Health Organization recommendation against travel restrictions, the U.S. went the opposite way, China's ministry spokesman said in an English language message. Where is its empathy? Oh, the journalists just gobbling up Chinese government propaganda. And the World Health Organization getting it wrong in the early stages of this outbreak when it comes to defending United States interests and our people. So just remember that as they try to run around and blame Trump for everything. The CDC testing failure was bad. It was the result of government regulation and bureaucracy and red tape that Trump had nothing to do with. And in fact, Trump has been running around slashing that red tape and that bureaucracy. That's what he has been up to. There's even more. Health experts warn China travel ban will hinder coronavirus response. That was in, I think, BuzzFeed. So they just went around and found experts that gave them an opportunity. Vox.com. The evidence on travel bans for diseases like coronavirus is clear. They don't work. Vox.com. Idiots. Wrong. Experts wrong. Journalists wrong. So just remember that. This is all from when Trump made that decision, which he was hit by all kinds of journalists and people, including, quote, experts for doing. And now everyone goes, wow, thousands of lives probably saved by that one decision. And those who say that, oh, it doesn't make any difference, they're not very good at math or wargaming anything out, because the whole problem we have right now is too many infections too fast. So that there are some infections that are already spreading in this country doesn't mean that we should have taken the approach of let's just have even more infections coming in. It won't make a difference. It makes all the difference. But crazy libs don't care about any of that. It's all about anti-Trumpism. It's absurd. Even with truly our lives and our economy in the balance, the most important thing for people whose lives are devoted to spreading information and holding, power accountable and all that other stuff they say, the most important thing they had was doing the dirty work of the Chinese Communist Party and the DNC. That was the motivation. And now we have back to Secretary of State Pompeo during the press conference today. Not only did he call it the China virus, and he's doing that very purposefully because he works on foreign policy and he knows what the Chinese are up to. He knows the nonsense that they're spreading, but people will believe it, the propaganda that they're using. Here is Pompeo on why it's important that we are accurate and the information that's out there about everything having to do with this virus, including where it came from, is truthful.
Secretary Pompeo, on the issue of disinformation, is there any particular locus for this disinformation, or is it diffused?
It's pretty diffused, unfortunately, but we've certainly seen it come from places like China and Russia and Iran, where there are coordinated efforts to disparage what America is doing in an activity to do all the things that President Trump has set in motion here.
Other than what you're doing this morning, what are you doing to fight back?
Lots of things, lots of work. One of the things we want to make sure is the American people go to trusted sources for that information. But we've made clear, we've spoken to these countries directly that that they need to knock it off, that we don't approve of it. And then there are a handful of other things we're engaged in to make sure that the right information is out there and accurate information is given. This idea of transparency and accurate information is very important. It's how we protect American people from something like this ever happening again.
So there you have the Secretary of State saying, make sure you get your information from trusted sources. Make sure you go with news outlets that aren't trying to stoke fear, and certainly don't trust state media in China. Because the Chinese government, we're always talking about how the Chinese Communist Party plays the long game, and they're so brilliant strategically. And there is some truth to them playing the long game, no question about that. And they're willing to be very deceptive, very dishonest, brutal, and authoritarian. But they know that the long game right now for them does not look good. People's views of China going forward are going to change around the rest of the world and here at home. We no longer can trust a lot of critical manufacturing to China. We no longer can trust that the Chinese will be good partners with telling the world the truth about the viruses that keep coming out of China. This is what happens. SARS came out of China. COVID-19, coronavirus, this came out of Wuhan in China. It keeps happening. So now finally the whole world has to pay attention to it because we're all being affected by it. I've got to say the lockdown in New York is already getting very tiresome, but it's getting more extreme too. Governor Cuomo here gave a press conference saying that while he's not calling this a shelter-in-place situation, he is declaring more extreme measures for us to stay out of the workplace, for us to stay home, and this is it's disconcerting. California is now on a state of lockdown. All of California, the whole state. It is a state of lockdown, I guess you could say. Gavin Newsom announced that. And Eric Garcetti, who's the mayor out in California, and to all of our listeners out on KEIB in Los Angeles, just want to let you guys know I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about all of our Team Buck, all Americans, but certainly all the Team Buck all across the country. But I know that, in LA right now, you've got the similar situation with Garcetti that I do here in New York with de Blasio, where you've just got an incompetent ideologue left-wing mayor. You can't trust to make the right decisions. You know that you're worried about where this is all going to go. And we all have to just sort of fight through it in our own way. But the lockdowns of whole states, and I think Pennsylvania is now increasingly on lockdown. I'm not even sure what the full, the tri-state area, which is New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, they're trying to mirror each other's policies so that there won't be just a jump around effect of people say, well, if I can go out and do more things in New Jersey, it's right next door to New York, I'll go there. And I believe Pennsylvania has joined in, so it's really a quad state now. There's 4 states all together in their policies because there's so much connectivity in terms of work and travel between those states in particular. So that's the situation up here in the Northeast. I know California is increasing in lockdown, and every state is dealing with this in its own way. But there's also the rising recognition of what I've been telling you, and that is we simply can't continue doing this. California can't tell us in an open-ended way, can't tell its residents, neither can New York, neither can any other state that's doing this. Yeah, you're just going to have to be on lockdown. You're just going to have to be patient with us as we figure out what's next here. And then you also have the because the economic realities of this are that the economy will just implode and there won't be an economy. We'll have to start building an economy from zero, not just turning an economy back on and needing it to regain some lost territory. That's currently where we are. So I think that this is the timeline that the country is facing. We don't have 3 months. We don't have 18 months for sure. I don't even think we really have 3 months, maybe max, of pretty extreme measures. We're going to have to start lessening measures. And that means that eventually we're going to see people, there's going to be casualties from this virus, no matter what we do, by the way. There already are casualties, but there'll be even more. And it's just going to be a question of getting this in 2, 3, 4 weeks' time to what is an acceptable amount of strain on the health system, what is an amount of casualties from the virus that we can sustain as a society while also sustaining our economy. It's a balancing act. There are no perfect answers here. And speaking of highly imperfect answers, here we have, the GOP has put out this bill on sending out the immediate checks. What they're saying is they want $1,200 a person, $2,400 if filing jointly, $500 per kid, and then there's a phase out above $75,000. It starts there, and then it phases out completely above $99,000, and there's a much smaller benefit of $600 for millions without federal tax liability. This is not going to work. It'll help a little bit, but it's not enough. And it's also really unfair. They're basing this on your tax filing from 2018, Okay, maybe you made $120,000 in 2018. Well, what did you make in 2019? We're in 2020. And how does this help people who might have just lost all of their income? Their entire business is shut down. We're supposed to think that if you made $100,000 2 years ago, you are in pretty good shape now. And also $100,000, and a lot of you listening to this know, I mentioned, KEIB before in Los Angeles, one of our wonderful affiliates, KFAB in Omaha. $100,000 goes a lot further in Omaha, Nebraska than it does in Los Angeles. So if someone's in an already expensive city and they're being measured against a nationwide metric for income, it just doesn't work. This isn't enough. We have to go back. The business of the American people needs to be business again. We can't do this lockdown thing for much longer. The economic pain will be too much. And I think that that's really what everyone is waking up to right now. Okay, it was the terror of the virus, but now we're getting into the discussion about, is the cure, so to speak, worse than the disease? Is the effort here against the virus doing so much damage to our economy and with it our livelihoods and with it our lives that we need to scale it back, even if it's not the single, even if it means that there's the efficacy of our antivirus efforts are hindered? This is the trade-off that we're trying to make right now. This is what we're trying to figure out as we go through all of this. And I'll just say it right now. We don't have months, maybe 2 we could do. And we can't do what we're doing right now with the whole lockdowns. That's 2 to 3 weeks max. And at that point, people are just going to non-comply. I'm going to non-comply. I can't do it. I can't stay cooped up in my apartment, unable to live life in any meaningful way outside of my home. I'm not going to be able to keep doing that for 60 or 90 days. I'm sorry. And I know the government, right now in California, Los Angeles, Garcetti's saying they're going to deputize people from city government to go around and make sure that everyone's abiding by all these rules. That'll work, right now. And everyone should abide for the next couple of weeks by the CDC and their state guidance on this. But it's a couple of weeks, maybe 3, 2. That's all. They come after me in a month and tell me that I can't walk on the street, get some fresh air, and, meet a friend, even if we're like keeping some distance. I'm sorry. That's not going to fly. No one is going to accept a total cessation of their life for months at a time, the destruction of the U.S. economy, the eradication of wealth that people have spent years, perhaps decades building up. For a lot of small business owners, maybe they just started to get in the black in the last year or two. They've been struggling, and finally we've got this robust economy the last 3 years. And now we're just going to tell them sorry? No, it's not going to work that way. We all know this deep down.
And your actions in recent weeks. January 24th, you tweeted out this: appreciate today's briefing from the president's top health officials on the novel coronavirus outbreak. These men and women are working around the clock to keep our country safe and healthy. Included Dr. Tony Fauci. He was there, among others. You preached calm to the public in your tweet. Did you leave that briefing with worry, or were you reassured that they were prepared?
I felt very confident that we were prepared. I think where we stand today, we could not have imagined how this has unfolded. But I will tell you, I commend the president, the task force, the vice president, all the doctors and nurses on the ground who are working so hard to address this.
They also purchased your third-party advisors, Sitnix, as I understand, which is a teleconferencing company. With workers displaced now, given the crisis, teleconferencing companies are doing quite well. Who are these third-party advisors? They seem to have a pretty good idea about where the market was headed.
So this is an exchange between Ed Henry on Fox News and Senator Kelly Loeffler of Georgia. And I got to tell you, very rarely do I read something in the media that really, really ticks me off, really sets me off. And this fell into that category. This was that. And I don't care that she's a Republican. Don't care. Don't care if, and Richard, Senator Burr of the Intelligence Committee also has now come under scrutiny for this. Here's the basic allegation: that there may be U.S. senators who had access to highly sensitive, classified, non-public information. So it's national security information and non-public information, and they may have acted on that. Kelly Loeffler sold $1.6 million of stock at a very opportune time and also bought into a bunch of telecommuting companies. Right, perfect timing on this. That's suspicious. Now, she was there trying to say that her advisors do this and she has no say in it. Really? I can just tell you this. If she has some phone calls to her advisors right around that time, this is the separation of interest that people pretend to have sometimes that does not stand up. If Burr or Loeffler are found to have acted on non-public information to enrich themselves, they should have to resign, and if applicable, they should face criminal prosecution. Now, I know Dianne Feinstein also sold some stock then. There was another Republican senator, I'm forgetting who it was off the top of my head. He came under scrutiny for this, but that was a private equity transaction that was years in the making. So no, that's not the same thing. People who dump, you can look at this, anybody who understands the stock market, somebody who dumps their stock right at the beginning of February after going into a briefing where they've been told, anyone who knew the numbers out of China were kind of fake and what's going on in Italy is about to turn into a massive catastrophe. And all of our experts are telling us that this is going to be much worse than anybody's anticipated right now. And anyone who then said, I'm going to sell the U.S. stock market based on that information, while telling the American people, invest. While telling people like me, you love this country, invest. I don't have a lot of money, but, I have some to invest. They invest in this country if you believe in it. I said, absolutely. I believe in America, so I'm going to put more cash in the stock market. I was doing that a month ago. Yeah. People like me look at this and say, oh, okay. So I invest in America, but maybe somebody who is a senator with classified access now is effectively, pulling cash out of America at just the time that's best benefit for them. So they got the rise in the market without the downside. Look, as far as I'm concerned on this, if they're guilty, and as I've said, I know what the explanation they'll probably offer is. One, Loeffler's saying, and she's married to the head of the New York Stock Exchange. So she's very rich, but don't think that stops people. Look, Martha Stewart was dumping stock on the advice of her broker. She shouldn't have been prosecuted for that, but her broker may have been the one who was acting on inside information on her behalf. And that was like a $40,000 stock transaction. Martha Stewart's worth like $1 billion. Okay, so very rich people can be very dumb and very greedy. It happens all the time. So just because Loeffler's worth a lot of money doesn't mean that she's not responsible here for this. We'll have to see if this holds up. Burr also, I think Burr's the one who sold $1.6 million of stock, or maybe it was Loeffler. One of them did. And that's how they usually gauge insider trading, is by the size of the transaction. And sometimes people get clever and they try to hide it. So they'll say, well, I'll buy a bunch of stocks that I don't care about. Maybe they'll go down, but I'll buy, $5,000 or $10,000 of those stocks. But then I'm going to short the whole U.S. Dow by like $100,000. Or I'm going to buy telecommuting companies because they're obviously going to become very useful when everyone's on lockdown and can't go to work. I'm going to spend $100,000 on that. You look at the pattern, you look at the way that they have conducted themselves based on the possibility of access to inside information. And Feinstein's name also has come up here. It's the whole thing. If anyone did this, they need to lose their job as a public official. And if applicable, it's a little bit tough because there was the Stock Act of 2012 that said that they could be guilty of insider trading. Insider trading cases are notoriously hard to prove, even when people are, really guilty. I mean, they went after like that guy Raj Rajaratnam of Galleon Capital. Some of you will remember that. And he got 11 years, I think, in federal prison. They gave him a real long stint. But they had him talking to people coming out of non-public meetings of people on the boards of companies and just getting on the phone and being like, oh, really? That's what's happening? Okay, I'm going to buy this. I mean, they had him absolutely nailed. Unless they have you absolutely nailed like that, it can be tough to make an insider trading case. Now, I know that you might say, well, Buck, there's more important things than whether someone... Yeah, but public trust right now in the officials that are making decisions, remember, they're mandating that you stay home. They're effectively telling you that we all have to take it in the teeth. We all have to watch our 401ks evaporate. We all have to take this loss This loss is a mandated loss in the stock market. The government is really what's pushing this now. Yeah, initially the fear over coronavirus and production and supply chain, that was all there. But when we're being told no more economy, stay home, that is the government saying we're tanking the economy. So it's not like, oh, you win some, you lose some. This is just a question of who was right and who was wrong and who got lucky. No, the government is telling us the economy is effectively turned off right now. And so anybody in government who is using their position in that apparatus to make money needs to be severely punished. And as I said, irrespective of party, I don't care what political party they're in. I want them gone if they're guilty. And I know we got other things to focus on right now. And so people are going to say, and by the way, this is true for anybody in the White House too. If you find out that someone who's a senior White House official, sold $1 million of stock right before this happened, sold all their ETFs and all their positions in the overall market, gotta go. Gots to go. Unacceptable. There are some things. We on the right, we do have principles, which can get in the way sometimes. Gets in the way of power. Gets in the way of getting what you want. On the left, they have no such problem, but they have no such principles either. So that's where we are on this insider trading situation. Some good news. Some good news I wanted to share with all of you. And that is that the tax day has been moved. Last couple of weeks, I've been trying to pull together all my tax stuff. So this was nice. I'm happy about this. First of all, we should all be much more outraged on tax day than we are, because it's appalling that the income tax is as high as it is, and the federal government is, as rapacious as it is. So that's one thing. I'm always amazed that people aren't more upset that they have to give so much of their money to the federal government. But I guess we get sort of, sucked into thinking that this is normal somehow. But it's going to be July 15th instead of April 15th, so you don't have to file. Unless, for those of you listening to this, a lot of you I know are going to get a refund, file now. You'll get that check. It'll maybe take whatever it is, a few weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. But if you have a nice refund coming, you don't have to wait till July. But for me, somebody who has quarterly payments and, I swear, for a guy who doesn't make that much money, I got more tax nonsense that I have to deal with, because I have all these different little side hustles and schemes to make money in media, mostly through my wonderful radio show. So thank you guys for all keeping the lights on here. But I do some other things. Every time I give a speech to some entity, that's income. That's a 1099. Every time I do this or that, 1099. I got to find all these 1099. Sometimes you write for a website, they'll send me a check for like $30. And then they'll send me the 1099. I'm like, I gotta submit a 1099 for $30. This is getting annoying. So anyway, this is a good news situation. I know it's not a great news situation, but it's nice that we get a little bit of a reprieve from tax day, because with all the other stress we're feeling right now, I think everyone understands that we didn't need this to be added on the list, added onto the pile of what we have to deal with. And by the time tax day comes around, we'll at least know where we are in this fight against COVID-19 and how we're doing against it. So, we'll see. We'll see if these policies that they're putting in place right now, these economic policies specifically, if they're doing a good job with it. This is gonna get pretty crazy pretty quickly. That much, unfortunately, I'm very confident of. So they're going to have to relax this, or the American people are going to relax the policies for them. Meaning we're going to have, as I've been calling it, mass non-compliance. And there's just not the resources or the will or the desire or, quite honestly, the right to force people to stay in their homes indefinitely. Government just can't do that. I don't care what the situation is out there.
Yesterday, there has been some promise with hydroxychloroquine, this potential therapy for people who are infected with coronavirus. Is there any evidence to suggest that, as with malaria, it might be used as a prophylaxis against COVID-19?
No, the answer is no. And the evidence that you're talking about, John, is anecdotal evidence. So as the commissioner of FDA and the president mentioned yesterday, we're trying to strike a balance between making something with a potential of an effect to the American people available at the same time that we do it under the auspices of a protocol that would give us information to determine if it's truly safe and truly effective. But the information that you're referring to specifically is anecdotal. It was not done in a controlled clinical trial, so you really can't make any definitive statement about it.
Mr. President, on that on those therapies?
I think without seeing too much, I'm probably more of a fan of that than maybe than anybody. But I'm a big fan, and we'll see what happens. And we all understand what the doctor said is 100% correct. It's early, but I've seen things that are impressive, and we'll see. We're going to know soon.
Oh, man. Here you go. The president trying to say that chloroquine is something that he is hopeful about. He let Dr. Fauci say exactly what he wanted to say. And Dr. Fauci is telling everybody, look, it's anecdotal. It's early. It's early. Don't think that this is going to be the savior of humanity, chloroquine, this old drug that's been around to treat malaria for like 50, 60 years now. Don't think that. And Trump comes out and says, look, I get it. Fauci's correct. It's too early. But, he's just trying to say in his Trumpian way, which we're all familiar with now, he's like, it's early. We'll see. But I'm hopeful. I think it's good. Trump is trying to say that, he is optimistic. That's all. And the media jumps on him for it. And it just drives me nuts after a while. I mean, the president is trying to keep people from freaking out, from panicking. And sure enough, we just keep having to hear from the clowns in the media how whatever he's doing is terrible, however he's operating is the wrong way. It's just, look, there is nothing. If I could make one thing in the world happen right now, if somebody said, Buck, I'll give you $10 million in cash right now, or you'll be able to go on air and do a report next week that chloroquine is highly effective in the treatment of this pandemic, I swear to you, I would say the latter, door number 2, because I don't even know if $10 million is going to be worth anything if we keep going down this pathway in a year. Plus, I care a lot more about the lives of loved ones and the American people than any amount of money. So you add these things together, you go, there's nothing that I want more in the world right now, nothing, than that this old drug happens to be the answer to this prayer. And I think Trump is just trying to give some voice to the, we're hopeful too. We're going to see where it goes. Nothing is perfect here, but, stay on it. We're going to stay on it. And Fauci is saying, guys, all right, I'm the scientist. It's not a good cop, bad cop situation, but it's a cold, hard science and then a leader. They're not approaching this from the exact same perspective. They're not contradicting each other. Trump said what Fauci said is 100% true. But he's just trying to give us hope. And then the media tries to jump all over him for that, tries to undermine him. So I think it's absolutely warranted when Trump scolds some of these absolute punks that, given all we're going through right now, they're still more focused on Trump's lying. He's not lying, you idiots. He just doesn't want people to give in to despair right now. I know what's going on. I'm seeing your messages from across the country. People are losing jobs. They're worried about losing homes. Now, I know they're going to hold back on foreclosures for a number of days here, and there's some other, financial relief that's coming to people. Fine, great. But guess what? That's only temporary. Those are temporary measures, and people are still having to buy groceries. People are still having to run up expenses with no income. It's not like when their job comes back, all of a sudden they don't owe that money on the mortgage. They're not wiping it all away. So people are in real pain right now and are scared. And I'm not even talking about the pain of the people that are in the ICU or the people that are suffering from this disease right now. That's horrific too. So we are going through this. This is where we need to really come together as Americans and as human beings. And to see just the lack of that common decency from people who have platforms, who should be reaching our fellow Americans every day, they're just a disgrace. And I wish it weren't so. And that I'm approaching this to be not just fair-minded. I'm trying to be generous in my assessments of different leaders. Newsom's lockdown in California seems, a little extreme maybe, but I think Newsom has approached this with seriousness, and I'm willing to see how it plays out. I think Cuomo in New York has approached this with seriousness. He's been a good, steady voice on this. De Blasio's a buffoon, but, there are people that are stepping up. And you've even heard from some Democrats in the House and the Senate, yes, the package we're working on is bipartisan, and this is a time for us to come together, and we should encourage all of that. That's good. None of this gamesmanship from lib-journos. We cannot allow this stuff to cloud our thinking at this point in time. So I'm with the president on this. People should not be able to act like total lunatics right now in the media and get away with it. And please, God, pray for chloroquine here. Pray for chloroquine that it works. It'll be the best news. It'll be the best news that maybe I'll ever be able to deliver to you on this show. If in fact it works, we'll see, as the president says.